Welcome to this episode of the Stoicism Legends podcast. Today's topic is one many avoid, but all encounter: deception in relationships. This video will explore how to recognize falsehood, misalignment, and manipulation in the people closest to us. Not through pop psychology or guesswork, but through the lens of Stoic philosophy. This is not gossip, this is examination, this is awareness. The Stoics taught us to see the world as it is, not as we wish it to be. That includes seeing people clearly. In this video, we'll cover how lies show up in behavior, what silence hides, and how language often reveals what it tries to conceal. We'll study patterns that break trust. We'll look at signs that betray intent. This isn't just about catching lies. It's about building character so strong that deception no longer penetrates your judgment. A Stoic does not seek to expose others as fools. A Stoic seeks to train the eye so it is no longer fooled. Let us begin. Chapter 1. The Stoic Stance on Truth. The Stoics placed truth as a core discipline. Truth in perception, truth in language, truth in conduct. Without truth, there is no virtue. There is only illusion. Epictetus warned his students, "Don't let your mind believe what your tongue would not swear to under oath." To the Stoics, lying is not just speaking falsehood. It is living without harmony between what is said and what is done. A person who makes promises but never follows through is lying. A person who flatters but holds resentment is lying. A person who hides behind vague words is avoiding clarity. That avoidance itself is a distortion. Seneca wrote that truth was the foundation of good friendship. If you cannot trust a person's words, then you cannot trust the bond. If their behavior must be interpreted rather than understood directly, then the relationship is built on shifting ground. A Stoic relationship is direct. It is based on shared values, mutual understanding, and honest expression. It accepts the presence of conflict, but does not allow deception to take root. Disagreements are faced head-on. Concerns are voiced plainly. There is no dependence on charm to cover mistakes, no need for pretense to maintain connection, no fear used to control emotion or outcome. The foundation is built on clarity. Each person knows where the other stands. When a Stoic speaks, they are not performing. Their words align with their reasoning. Their message does not shift with convenience. Their speech is shaped by principle, not manipulation. In a Stoic relationship, trust is not built through affection alone. It is earned through consistency. Promises are not made casually. They are made with the intent to be fulfilled. Each commitment is measured, and once spoken, it is treated as a responsibility. This is not idealism, it is structure. The Stoic prepares to deliver on what they say. If the promise cannot be honored, they do not offer it. If the conditions change, they communicate that change. Their reliability does not depend on mood or ease, it depends on discipline. This is the first and constant test of character. Do their actions match their language? The answer defines the depth of trust. Words signal intent. Behavior confirms or contradicts that intent. A person can speak about commitment, loyalty, or change, but those statements hold no value unless they are followed by steady action. The Stoic watches for alignment. They are not persuaded by enthusiasm or strong language. They look at patterns. When someone says they care, but they disappear during hardship, their absence is the message. When they speak of improvement, but their habits remain unchanged, their true priority is comfort, not growth. An apology followed by repetition of the same action shows that the words were empty. A person who continually breaks their word teaches you to disregard their speech. Their expression becomes noise. Their language becomes decoration. In a Stoic relationship, trust is built by congruence. Every time someone acts in a way that confirms their speech, trust becomes sturdier. When they break that alignment, trust weakens. This is not a matter of perfection. It is a matter of integrity. A person either follows through on their values or they do not. That distinction is simple to detect when emotion does not cloud perception. The Stoic trains clarity so they do not confuse promises with proof. They do not rely on hopeful interpretation. They evaluate based on consistency. Words alone are not the foundation of a bond. It is the visible match between a person's stated values and their repeated behavior that earns confidence. That is what separates intention from truth. That is what separates image from reality. Chapter 2. When language becomes smoke. Liars often use language to create fog. Pay attention when someone gives long explanations for simple events. Pay attention when someone avoids giving straight answers. Pay attention when they use distraction instead of clarity. A person who is honest speaks directly. They do not fear short answers. They do not dress their intent in decoration. When someone begins every sentence with qualifiers, when they shift blame with practiced words, when their stories require mental gymnastics, this is not complexity, this is concealment. The Stoics valued clarity. They viewed it as a requirement for sound thinking and stable action. A person who avoids clarity in their words is not practicing caution. They are avoiding responsibility. If someone refuses to define their intentions, it becomes difficult to measure their behavior against any standard. This makes accountability impossible. When intentions are unclear, actions can be denied, twisted, or excused. Vagueness is not a passive trait. It is a way to delay consequences. When someone speaks in circles, offers unclear answers, or constantly shifts focus, they are not helping you understand them. They are giving themselves room to escape commitment. This pattern can be observed in people who fear direct consequences or in those who rely on confusion to avoid being pinned down. In relationships, this leads to imbalance. One person speaks clearly, the other responds with ambiguity. That imbalance creates tension and breaks trust. Clarity is a form of respect. When someone is clear with you, they are treating you as an equal. They are offering you the information you need to think, decide, and respond. When someone is vague, they are trying to keep control. They want to guide how you perceive them without giving you the full picture. This form of control often leads to deception. When deception is repeated, it becomes manipulation. Ask yourself, is this person giving answers that make sense? Do their explanations stay grounded, or do they drift into unnecessary details? Are they responding to the question asked or steering the conversation away? These signs matter. They reveal intent. A clear answer is usually brief and steady. A dishonest one needs more support. It needs justifications, backstory, emotion, and redirection. This extra weight signals that the message cannot stand on its own. When you notice confusion where there should be clarity, hold to your principles. Stay firm in your standard of communication. Do not lower it just to keep the peace. Wait for the truth to show itself through action. If the words remain cloudy and the behavior inconsistent, then the message has delivered itself. Let their words be tested by their behavior. Let their position reveal its strength or collapse under pressure. Chapter 3. The eyes that avoid contact. People often betray themselves through non-verbal habits. A Stoic trains attention to patterns, not guesses, not assumptions. Patterns. When a person avoids your eyes during direct questions, that is not always guilt, but it is always information. When they change the subject each time you approach a boundary, it reveals that the subject holds tension. When someone suddenly becomes overly generous, overly flattering, overly concerned after a mistake, this may be repair, or it may be distraction. Stoics observe behavior without immediate judgment, but they record. They compare words with patterns. They notice what happens when truth is expected. Does the person answer, or do they flinch? Remember Marcus Aurelius. The best revenge is to be unlike him who performed the injury. Do not respond to deception with deception. The purpose of this statement is not to encourage passivity. It is a directive to remain steady in your principles when others violate theirs. The Stoic approach to betrayal is not to imitate the behavior of the deceiver. Imitation turns the injured person into a reflection of the one who caused the injury. That is not strength, that is contamination. Stoic discipline means responding in a way that protects your character rather than compromises it. When someone lies, they are making a declaration about their standards. Your response should reveal yours. Remain composed. Keep your structure intact. Do not let their falsehood pull you into reactive behavior. Do not retaliate through misdirection, silence, or false appearances. If you lower your standards in response to theirs, you lose your grip on your own identity. When you respond with watchfulness, you gain information. When you respond with discipline, you reinforce your values. When you respond with consistency, you build reliability that others will notice. If their eyes shift during questioning, it reveals discomfort. If their tone becomes uneven when details are requested, it reveals hesitation. If their speech rhythm breaks when accountability is near, it shows tension they cannot control. These signs should not provoke confrontation. They should trigger observation. The Stoic does not rush to punish or accuse. They store what is seen. They observe what happens when clarity enters the conversation. Most lies do not need to be chased. They will collapse under their own weight. Your role in these moments is to remain clear. If you observe dishonesty, you do not need to expose it through emotional reaction. You record it through action. You take a mental note. You watch for a pattern. You compare present behavior to previous statements. Each inconsistency builds the case. When the truth is strong, it holds firm under scrutiny. When the message is false, it fractures under simple questions. A lie cannot maintain structure across time, pressure, and exposure. You do not need to demand proof from those who lie. You need to give them room to reveal it. In relationships, when someone is tested by truth, their body language often tells the story before their words do. The face, the hands, the silence, the tone. Each element reveals whether they are grounded in truth or resisting it. The Stoic approach is to witness without interruption. Truth does not need to be forced. It needs to be recognized. Remain still. Let them speak. Let them shift. Let them fill the space. Give them the opportunity to show their alignment or their conflict. Watch how they carry the weight of simple questions. Listen for the tone they use when they answer. Observe their gestures, their pace, and their pauses. Each of these carries meaning. When a person is grounded in truth, they are able to maintain consistency across body language, speech, and energy. When they are managing appearances, small cracks begin to show. Deception breaks under pressure. It struggles to maintain form when questions are repeated. It loses control when memory is required. You do not need to apply force. You need to remain present and observe. The pressure is already there. It is in the reality they are trying to hide. If they are speaking from a real place, they will remain steady. If they are covering something, you will notice hesitation, contradiction, or unease. You are not responsible for forcing the truth to appear. You are responsible for noticing what the situation reveals. By staying still and letting others speak, you make room for patterns to emerge. When you interrupt or push, you often interrupt the process. The Stoic approach is to remove personal urgency. The focus is on understanding, not control. This approach allows you to see people as they are, Without distorting the view with your expectations, let them repeat themselves, let them wander, let them construct their version of the story. Then compare it with what you already know. Compare it with previous statements. Compare it with what their behavior confirms. When truth and action are aligned, things remain simple. When they are not, explanations require adjustment, and those adjustments rarely hold. Stillness is a test. It shows whether the other person relies on clarity or confusion. If they are managing perception, they will become uncomfortable with silence. They will rush to fill the space. They will try to shift the focus or distract with emotional appeals. If they are anchored in truth, they will meet the silence with presence. They will allow questions to stand without fear. Watchfulness is your defense. Discipline is your protection. Consistency is your strength. You do not need to argue or debate to detect dishonesty. You need to remain still long enough for the gap between what is said and what is real to become visible. Lies stretch. Truth holds shape. When you remain steady, their story has no choice but to prove itself. Chapter 4. Inconsistency as signal. When a person says one thing and does another, you are not observing forgetfulness. You are observing conflict. Integrity is not occasional, it is constant. A person who lies does not always mean harm, but they do always create harm. Inconsistency in stories, inconsistency in timelines, inconsistency in emotional responses. These are not random, they are patterns trying to remain hidden. The Stoic does not accuse too quickly. They wait, they review, they pay attention to details and look for patterns that repeat. One event may be misleading. Two may raise concern. When contradictions show up across time and context, they no longer ignore them. The Stoic checks for consistency between what is said and what is done. Each break between word and behavior is noted. Each shift between statement and action becomes part of the record. They do not rush to conclusions. They verify slowly. They measure a person by how they maintain alignment when no one is watching. Trust that is built on clear and repeated observation is stable. It does not collapse with small errors or emotional strain. It is grounded in evidence. It reflects what the person has shown, not just what they have said. Trust built on hope remains fragile. It depends on expectation rather than verification. It leads to disappointment because it asks for belief without requiring proof. The Stoic protects themselves by observing behavior without distortion. They are not cynical, they are precise. Keep record. Do not carry resentment. Record without bias. Precision means writing things down mentally or literally without exaggeration. The purpose is not to condemn the other person, but to protect your judgment. Inconsistencies are often subtle when they appear alone, but when they build, they form a clear signal. If someone contradicts themselves often, if they shift their story depending on who listens, or if they avoid accountability while claiming transparency, the Stoic pays close attention. The question then becomes clear. Is this the result of confusion or the result of deception? Facts answer that question. Feelings cloud it. The Stoic does not trust their moods. They trust the alignment between behavior and principle. If someone claims a value, they must demonstrate it. If they promise a change, they must show it. When their behavior weakens their own claims, the Stoic does not explain it away. They adjust. They do not attack. They do not excuse. They observe, conclude, and act. To live clearly is to notice clearly. Clear perception requires effort. Most lies are not told in full. They appear as fragments, pieces, half explanations, inconsistent timelines, convenient memories. The average person dismisses these as normal mistakes. The Stoic studies them. They place each fragment in context. They collect enough to form a clear picture. That picture reveals truth or contradiction. This is the practice of discernment. It is the skill of separating signals from noise. It is the ability to collect facts and align them without letting emotion distort the process. Discernment does not depend on intensity of feeling. It depends on pattern recognition, accuracy, and mental stability. The Stoic holds judgment still while information is incomplete. They wait for patterns to show themselves through consistent observation. This is not inaction, it is measured attention. A person who speaks quickly often speaks carelessly. A person who draws conclusions before evidence creates bias. The Stoic resists both. They listen to words, watch behavior, and track consistency. Each detail, no matter how small, is treated as data. Contradictions are not ignored. Gaps in explanation are marked. Sudden changes in position are noted. The Stoic compares what was said yesterday to what is said today. They compare what was promised with what was delivered. This comparison does not happen once. It is ongoing. It forms the foundation of judgment. Discernment also involves restraint. It is the ability to hold a position without the need to immediately express it. This requires strength of judgment. Speaking before you understand creates confusion. Accusing without evidence creates conflict. The Stoic avoids both. They allow events to unfold before responding. They wait for details to become clear. They give space for people to show what they intend, not just what they say. The Stoic does not try to guess what another person feels or intends. They measure what is observable. Behavior provides the clearest signal. People may say what they think they should say. Their actions show what they are willing to do. Words can be shaped to fit any situation. Actions are more difficult to control. Over time, behavior settles into patterns. These patterns show values, priorities, and truth. As the Stoic collects information, each small detail adds to the structure. One inconsistency is noted. A second one is compared. A third confirms the direction. Slowly, a picture forms. The events stop appearing isolated. The meaning becomes visible. The pattern grows stronger than the excuses. At that point, the Stoic is no longer working with fragments. They are working with structure. When the pattern is strong enough, the Stoic acts. The action may be a decision. It may be a boundary. It may be a conversation. But it is grounded. It is supported by a trail of facts, not feelings. The clarity behind the action gives it stability. The Stoic does not act with haste or emotion. They act with full understanding of what they have observed. Their decision does not require validation. It is based on reality. Discernment moves with precision. It does not act early. It does not act late. It acts when the truth becomes clear through repeated signals. This protects the Stoic from being manipulated. It reduces regret. It prevents unnecessary confrontation. It establishes a standard of clarity that becomes harder to distort. Others may try to influence with emotion or distraction, but discernment keeps the focus on the facts. When discernment speaks, it is brief. It does not exaggerate. It points to what has been recorded and what those records show. It uses examples. It names patterns. It outlines what has been seen. This makes the Stoic's judgment reliable. It separates misunderstanding from dishonesty. It separates confusion from intent. This filter is what guides the Stoic in deciding who earns trust and who must be kept at a distance. Chapter 5. The illusion of change without evidence. Many liars promise change. They speak of growth. They describe internal shifts and realizations. They tell stories about lessons learned and clarity gained. These claims sound convincing when delivered with emotion. They often come during moments of exposure, after being caught in contradiction or dishonesty. These moments bring pressure. Pressure brings performance. A person who wants to protect their image will offer promises quickly. They may appear sincere, they may cry, They may describe how deeply they want to improve. The Stoics did not base their judgment on expression. They watched what followed. They trained themselves to listen without giving weight to tone alone. They gave attention to what came after the apology. They looked at conduct, not confession. They watched for action that matched the spoken claim. The Stoic separates emotion from evidence. They study what a person does after the pressure has passed. If the behavior remains unchanged, the promise was a tool. It was used to lower the tension. It was used to calm the situation. It was used to reset perception, but it did not reflect actual effort. When a person continues the same pattern, despite claiming insight, the claim holds no value. Words are easy to repeat. They cost nothing. They can be shaped to match the setting. Change requires structure. It requires repeated effort. It creates discomfort. Real change interrupts the pattern that caused the damage. A person who is changing does not need to announce it. Their habits begin to look different. Their rhythm becomes more stable. They begin to take responsibility without prompting. They become less reactive. They explain less and do more. You do not need to search for signs. They become clear through consistency. They show up in how the person speaks, how they respond to correction, and how they manage emotion. These signs are not perfect, but they are real. They mark effort. They are visible without being declared. If someone lies and you confront them and they express guilt, but nothing shifts afterward, then the words were part of a strategy. They were used to lower your resistance. The emotional expression served a function. It was meant to calm your reaction and reset your expectations. If they offer an apology, but it is followed by justification, defensiveness, or delay, the pattern becomes clear. If the same actions return under new labels or excuses, the message is consistent. They are not trying to correct the behavior. They are trying to preserve control. The Stoic does not entertain the repetition. They do not ask for better explanations. They do not wait for different packaging. They evaluate the pattern. They act once it is stable enough to confirm. A Stoic listens with focus. They do not interrupt someone trying to apologize. They allow the full statement to be made. They do not argue with a person expressing guilt. They do not shut down clarification. They let the full position be heard. But once the apology is finished, the Stoic returns to observation. They watch what happens after the emotion fades. Do actions begin to change? Does the person take responsibility in silence? Do they act without needing to be reminded or praised for small improvements? These are the signals that matter. Change is rarely sudden, but it does become visible. If the same excuses return in new words, the behavior has not been addressed. If nothing shifts in attitude, tone, or discipline, then the apology did not reach the root of the issue. It was tactical. It was used to protect status, image, or comfort. The Stoic is not moved by how sincere something sounds. They examine what it leads to. If it leads to nothing, then it was spoken for relief, not for repair. The apology is the first step. It opens the door. What comes after determines if the door leads somewhere or loops back to the same cycle. If no progress follows the expression of regret, then the regret was surface level. It was reactive. The Stoic watches for a shift in rhythm, tone, and behavior. If none appear, they stop leaning on words. They stop using the apology as a reason to hope. They use it as data. Then they adjust their involvement based on what was proven. They do not hold resentment. They do not use bitterness to justify withdrawal. They recalibrate because clarity demands it. If someone fails to act on what they admit, then the Stoic pulls back. They no longer engage at the same level. They stop explaining the same things. They stop waiting for the same promises. They return their energy to structure. They give their time to what reflects integrity. This adjustment is quiet. It does not require a confrontation. It does not depend on being understood. The Stoic does not explain their distance unless necessary. They simply remove themselves from patterns that contradict principle. They lower access. They shift the weight of expectation. These are not emotional moves. These are corrections. When someone repeatedly fails to back their words with action, the Stoic stops granting their words influence. This method protects judgment. It removes noise. It keeps standards intact when people try to lower them. The Stoic moves in response to facts. They do not chase apology. They do not demand confession. They wait, observe, and act. If the facts show instability, the Stoic steps away from dependence. This is how they remain unshaken. This is how they maintain clarity under pressure. This is how they separate influence from trust. Chapter 6. False intimacy as manipulation. Liars sometimes create an artificial sense of closeness. They tell secrets quickly. They exaggerate their emotional connection. They push for vulnerability. But this intimacy is not earned. It is used as camouflage. This approach bypasses the normal pace of relationship building. It creates an emotional atmosphere that feels deep but has no foundation. The information they reveal is often selected to draw sympathy or to make you feel included in something personal. It is not always false, but it is often used strategically. It serves a function: to lower your guard. They exaggerate the emotional bond. They speak in ways that suggest a special understanding exists. They say things like, "I've never felt this with anyone," or "I feel like I can tell you anything," early in the relationship. These phrases may feel flattering, but when used without evidence of consistency or mutual growth, they are often part of a tactic to gain access. Emotional shortcuts are appealing. They reduce effort and bypass accountability. The person pushing for quick closeness benefits from the emotional attachment that results, but they do not always intend to carry the responsibility that real intimacy requires. Real intimacy is a result of tested interaction. It forms through repeated behavior, shared trials, and mutual contribution. It includes respect for boundaries and time. It involves conflict, resolution, and communication. A person who pushes for fast emotional access without earning it is not building trust. They are creating dependency. When someone insists that you trust them immediately without having shown why that trust is deserved, it is a sign of imbalance. When someone demands forgiveness before they have acknowledged their actions or changed their behavior, it is a misuse of vulnerability. The Stoics placed value on boundaries as a way to protect integrity. They viewed love and friendship as serious responsibilities, not emotional privileges. A relationship without boundaries collapses into confusion. A relationship without structure is easy to manipulate. When a person confuses intensity with loyalty or urgency with truth, they often overlook behavior that contradicts the emotional tone. This makes it difficult to judge the situation clearly. A Stoic does not reject closeness. They allow space for emotion, but they apply judgment. They recognize that genuine trust grows through behavior, not declarations. They do not confuse speed with sincerity. When a person tries to move faster than the relationship has earned, the Stoic becomes alert. They watch for signs that the emotional momentum is being used to prevent accountability. When the pace of connection does not match the quality of conduct, the Stoic slows down. False intimacy often leads to confusion. It creates emotional attachment before the facts have had time to settle. It asks you to respond with trust before truth has been demonstrated. It makes it harder to walk away, even when the behavior does not align with the words. That confusion is dangerous. It shifts your focus from what is happening to what is being said about what is happening. You begin to interpret the relationship through emotion instead of pattern. To avoid this, maintain clarity. Let actions shape your sense of closeness. Pay attention to consistency. Evaluate the weight of their words against the steadiness of their behavior. Do not reward emotional speed with increased access. Do not mistake openness for trustworthiness. Real intimacy requires time, effort, and responsibility. It cannot be replaced by dramatic expression or fast attachment. Closeness is meaningful only when it is backed by evidence. Truth in a relationship is not created by intensity. It is revealed by endurance. Chapter 7. Silence as evasion. A person who cannot answer your questions directly is hiding something. Silence can be strategic. Stoics used silence to reflect, to center, to withhold judgment. But when silence is used to avoid responsibility, it is not virtuous. When someone refuses to answer direct questions, disappears when clarity is required, or delays communication until the emotional tension fades, these are not random behaviors. These are signals. When repeated, these signals form a pattern. That pattern is often avoidance. They are not using distance to process. They are using it to postpone consequences. Inconsistent communication during key moments should be examined closely. When a person has the chance to provide clarity but chooses absence, the silence becomes part of the message. The Stoic trains their awareness to identify motive, not just behavior. Silence can serve different purposes. It can be used for restraint. It can also be used to avoid discomfort, confrontation, or accountability. Silence is not always dishonest, but repeated silence when direct truth is needed becomes a method of concealment. This behavior prevents resolution. It stalls necessary conversation. It allows false narratives to survive longer than they should. Pay attention to the timing and context of silence. Notice when the person becomes unavailable. Ask whether they stay present during calm conversations but disappear during moments of pressure. Track when the silence begins and what triggered it. Silence during honest reflection serves understanding. Silence during critical questioning avoids exposure. That distinction reveals how the person manages truth. People who go quiet when correction is near often fear being held accountable. Their silence is used to protect their image, not the relationship. A Stoic holds their center during these moments. They do not chase the person for answers. They ask clearly. They communicate their position. Then they wait. They let the silence do its work. They give space for the truth to surface through response or through lack of it. A person who is sincere will return with clarity. A person who is hiding will often extend the silence or return with confusion and deflection. The Stoic does not escalate. They remain steady. They let the silence speak for itself. They track the shift in tone, presence, and behavior. They study how a person reacts when accountability enters the space. Silence in moments of pressure shows where a person's priorities are. Some use silence to reflect. Others use it to escape. The difference is revealed through timing and repetition. If the person avoids direct engagement when correction is near, the Stoic notes it. If they delay conversations until their position is less exposed, the Stoic recognizes that pattern. The quality of the response that follows, or the continued absence of one, confirms the direction. If the answer arrives incomplete, unclear, or defensive, the Stoic does not explain it away. If no response arrives at all, that silence becomes part of the decision. The Stoic does not push for a better version of the same avoidance. They reduce their investment in unstable communication. They no longer wait for clarity from someone who repeatedly avoids it. They do not argue with silence. They observe what it signals. Then they act with measured detachment. Their time and energy shift toward clarity. They invest in people and conversations that maintain structure and mutual understanding. This posture protects the mind from confusion. It keeps emotion from becoming the filter for judgment. It reduces the need for guesswork. The Stoic returns their attention to what is known, not what is promised. This stabilizes their choices. It keeps decisions aligned with fact. It avoids emotional buildup from repeated disappointment. It clears away the distraction of waiting for someone to meet a standard they repeatedly avoid. The Stoic understands that silence, like speech, reveals intention. Some use words to mislead, some use silence to maintain control. Both carry information. If someone removes themselves each time responsibility appears, they are showing you what they prefer. They prefer ease over clarity. They prefer delay over resolution. They do not say it directly, but their pattern confirms it. You do not need to explain this choice to them. You do not need to convince them of the consequences. The evidence is visible. Your task is to respond with alignment. You remove your energy from uncertainty. You stop expecting stable communication from someone who avoids stability. You act on what has been shown, not on what might be explained later. This practice preserves clarity. It removes the weight of guessing. It simplifies your view. You stop trying to understand silence by filling in blanks. You start letting silence show its function. You adjust your expectations according to what has been proven. You step back when the message is confirmed. This is how the Stoic remains unshaken by silence. This is how they interpret inaction as clearly as they interpret speech. Chapter 8. Lies in Flattery. Flattery is the easiest lie to overlook. It sounds good. It reinforces self-image. It creates a feeling of recognition without requiring effort. A compliment can influence behavior quickly. People are more likely to trust someone who praises them, even without knowing the person well. This makes flattery an effective tool for manipulation. It builds comfort. It lowers resistance. It creates emotional access without proving character. A Stoic does not build their self-worth on compliments. Praise is acknowledged, but not absorbed without question. When someone flatters constantly, the Stoic watches the intention behind the words. Is the praise consistent with action? Is it earned through shared experience? Is it used to support growth or to win favor? Flattery without evidence is not encouragement. It is strategy. It is designed to gain influence without accountability. Praise that ignores fault is not support. It is disguise. A person who only sees the good and avoids giving honest feedback is not helping you grow. They are protecting their role in your life. This kind of approval creates dependence. The Stoic avoids this trap by seeking correction. They prefer relationships that hold them to a higher standard. They look for people who speak clearly when something needs to be addressed. Seneca advised, associate with people who are likely to improve you. Improvement requires challenge. It includes correction. It does not come from empty praise. It comes from honest mirrors, those who point out what must be sharpened. The Stoic chooses companions who practice truth, not those who repeat affirmations for comfort. If a person only praises but never corrects, their loyalty may be superficial. Their approval becomes a transaction. They offer affirmation to remain liked, to stay needed, or to gain access. Their praise becomes currency. It is spent to avoid friction. It is spent to build dependence. It is spent to secure their position. The Stoic does not accept this form of influence. They step back from those who avoid directness. Truth stands beside honesty. A real friend praises when it is earned and corrects when it is needed. They do not protect you from discomfort. They help you meet it. Their praise has weight because it comes with balance. They are not afraid to name mistakes. They are not silent when action slips out of alignment. That kind of person strengthens your discipline. They sharpen your awareness. They support your growth with structure, not flattery. Every compliment must be weighed. Ask, is this based on something clear? Is this consistent with my actions? Does this person offer truth in other areas or only praise? If the compliment feels inflated or constant, examine why. A person who flatters everyone is often seeking position, not connection. The Stoic remains alert to these patterns. They do not become dependent on positive attention. They understand that praise can be used as a tool. The one who flatters often wants something. They may want trust. They may want closeness. They may want control. Flattery, when used without grounding, is a warning sign. The praise of liars always comes with a price. Sometimes it is attention. Sometimes it is loyalty. Sometimes it is silence. The exchange is rarely named directly. It operates through suggestion, repetition, and emotional reinforcement. When a person flatters you repeatedly without offering correction, they are shaping the environment to serve their influence. The praise becomes a transaction. It makes you more tolerant of their inconsistencies. It makes you hesitate before offering criticism in return. It makes you second-guess your discomfort. This is how manipulation begins to settle in without resistance. The Stoic listens with care. They do not reject praise automatically, but they do not accept it blindly. They evaluate the intent, the pattern, and the accuracy. They ask, does this praise match what I've done? Does this person speak with the same clarity in difficult conversations? Are they honest when something needs to be addressed? These questions protect the mind from being softened by approval that is meant to seduce rather than support. If the praise distorts clarity, it is rejected. If it removes accountability, it is marked as dangerous. If it replaces correction with comfort, it is no longer a tool for growth. It becomes a method of control. The Stoic tracks how praise is used. They measure its consistency. They test whether it is attached to truth or used to create loyalty. They stay grounded when admiration comes easily and frequently. A compliment has value when it is earned. It has power when it reflects effort, principle, or discipline. When it appears without cause, the Stoic becomes alert. When it is constant, they become cautious. They know that some people use praise to avoid correction. Some use it to maintain closeness without responsibility. Some use it to gain cooperation without earning trust. The Stoic holds their standard. They do not allow compliments to interfere with judgment. They do not trade clarity for comfort. They return to principle, then observe the pattern. They listen to the words, but watch what the words are doing. If the praise is designed to keep them quiet, keep them close, or keep them dependent, they make adjustments. They reduce the influence of the person offering it. They place more weight on conduct and consistency. This is how they remain clear in a world where even praise can be used as a weapon. Chapter 9. When they lie to themselves. Some lies are not told to others. They are told inward. A person who deceives themselves is unstable. They shift their version of events to protect their identity. They explain away responsibility. They change details to avoid guilt. This internal distortion becomes their new reality. It affects how they speak, how they argue, and how they form relationships. The person is not living with awareness. They are maintaining a narrative that allows them to avoid discomfort. Self-deception allows the person to continue harmful behavior without interruption. When someone cannot tolerate truth, they begin to block it. They reject feedback. They ignore contradictions in their own behavior. They tell stories that reduce accountability. They make themselves the victim in every conflict. These habits grow stronger as they are repeated. Over time, the difference between what actually happened and what they believe becomes difficult to track, even for them. The Stoics taught that self-deception is the foundation of many personal failures. It leads to broken relationships, repeated mistakes, and constant tension. A person who cannot confront their own contradictions becomes unreliable. They apologize when pressed, but only for effect. The words sound right, but they carry no weight. Their love becomes inconsistent. Their sense of fairness breaks down when it threatens their comfort. Their emotional reactions are not based on shared truth, but on protecting their inner story. You cannot trust a person who cannot see themselves. You may care for them, you may wish for their growth, but your decisions must reflect what they show, not what you hope. You can speak with respect. You can set limits without aggression, but you cannot rely on their version of events. You cannot build your perception on their perspective. If they lie to themselves, they will lie to you. They may not do it with intention, but the result is the same. Their version of the truth becomes a shifting tool. They believe what they need to believe in order to keep their self-image intact. They are not rooted in clarity. They are floating between justifications. The danger is not just in what they say to others. The deeper risk is in what they believe about themselves. This kind of blindness cannot be corrected with logic alone. The Stoic does not debate with self-deception. They do not enter long arguments trying to force awareness. Instead, they increase observation. They measure what the person avoids. They track how often their version of reality shifts to protect them from responsibility. They take those shifts seriously. They adjust their involvement accordingly. Train your discernment. Start with yourself. Examine your reactions. Look at where you excuse your own contradictions. Ask what story you cling to when discomfort rises. Clarify where you delay growth by protecting ego. Remove your own self-deceptions so you can see others more clearly. When your vision is clear, you are less likely to be pulled into someone else's illusion. Once you see clearly, do not chase correction in others. Let their behavior define their level of awareness. Let their decisions reveal what they are ready to face and what they continue to avoid. A person's willingness to confront their patterns is visible. They either take responsibility or shift blame. They either make adjustments or repeat excuses. The Stoic does not need verbal confirmation to see this. They watch what the person does after truth has been presented. When someone avoids correction, they are not ready to change. When they argue against every fact, they are trying to protect a version of themselves. The Stoic accepts this without resistance. They do not demand understanding. They do not pressure the person to acknowledge what is obvious. They remove their effort from that task. They place their attention on what is stable, verifiable, and consistent. They keep their standards intact without trying to force others to match them. Trust is based on structure. It is based on what a person repeats, not on what they promise. If their actions show inconsistency, you treat them as inconsistent. If their judgment lacks discipline, you do not depend on their version of events. You adjust based on what is proven. This requires calm observation and disciplined restraint. The Stoic protects their inner clarity by not arguing with distortion. They do not lower their standard for the sake of temporary peace. Limiting trust does not mean withdrawing all care. It means assigning influence based on facts. It means reducing access when confusion becomes a pattern. It means stepping back when a person shows they are not capable of holding clarity with you. The Stoic does not explain these decisions to be understood. They make the adjustments because it is necessary. They act in alignment with reality, not with wishful thinking. This is how the Stoic protects their integrity. They do not merge their thinking with someone who is lost in denial. They do not depend on a person who cannot face themselves. They remain kind, but grounded. They remain present, but watchful. They apply judgment, not hope. In a world where many hide behind emotional narratives and shifting self-image, the Stoic continues forward with facts, structure, and clarity. Chapter 10. Patterns speak louder than promises. People can make many claims about who they are, what they value, and what they intend to do. They speak with confidence. They describe their character. They offer explanations. They outline goals. These statements may sound firm, but the Stoic looks past the surface. Words serve many purposes. They can express principle. They can also serve as a shield. In Stoic practice, patterns always carry greater weight than declarations. Patterns are evidence. Declarations are proposals. A person may speak of honesty, yet avoid the discomfort of direct conversation. They may promise transparency, then conceal the details that reveal true motives. They may talk about growth, but stay inside the same behavior they claim to have outgrown. They may use the language of self-awareness while making no effort to change harmful habits. They may say they value truth, but alter facts when those facts threaten their image. Each of these reveals a pattern. The Stoic pays attention to that repetition. In Stoic evaluation, what is done consistently holds more value than what is said occasionally. A pattern of excuses cannot be erased by a single apology. A pattern of blame shifting is not corrected by a single act of accountability. A pattern of betrayal is not erased by a temporary display of care. If the same actions return in different forms, the Stoic registers that as evidence. They do not adjust their standard because the tone of the apology was sincere. They compare the words with the long-term structure of behavior. If someone repeatedly shows who they are through action, it must be treated as reliable. A person who constantly avoids ownership, who speaks well but acts poorly, is showing you what they prioritize. The Stoic does not wait for improved messaging. They look at the framework of conduct. They ask whether adjustments are being made. They track whether patterns are becoming more stable or more manipulative. They are not distracted by surface improvement that lacks follow-through. Do they respond with accountability? Do they learn from past actions? Do they change small behaviors to support larger values? Or do they repackage the same behavior with new language? These questions guide the Stoics' judgment. They do not expect perfection. They expect proof. Proof is not delivered through promises. It is demonstrated through measurable consistency. Clarity is found in repetition. When behavior aligns with words over time, trust builds. When behavior contradicts words repeatedly, trust breaks. One mistake does not define a person, but a pattern of similar mistakes reveals priorities. The Stoic takes the pattern seriously. They measure how often the gap between word and deed is dismissed, defended, or denied. This shows whether growth is being pursued or only performed. The Stoic does not rush to label. They gather information. They watch the gap between stated values and practiced behavior. They compare conversations with conduct. They track adjustments, or the lack of them. Over time, this forms a complete picture. They no longer need to guess. They are not relying on emotion. They are relying on accumulated evidence. Eventually, the pattern speaks louder than the person. At that point, the Stoic acts. They do not wait for stronger wording. They do not ask for clearer promises. They respond to what has been shown repeatedly. Their action reflects calm. It reflects structure. It is based on fact. The Stoic does not need dramatic closure. They need alignment between reality and decision. When that alignment is reached, they adjust without resentment. They move with precision. They step away from distortion and back toward principle. Chapter 11. The Disguise of Charm. Charm is often mistaken for character. A person who is skilled at making others feel comfortable, admired, or entertained may be using charm as a method. They speak well, read social cues quickly, and make strong first impressions. But charm alone is not proof of virtue. It can be used to gain trust without offering substance. The Stoics viewed charm as neutral. It is a social tool. Its value depends on how it is used. If it aligns with principle, it supports communication. If it is used to hide intent, it becomes a mask. A charming person who avoids accountability is dangerous. They use ease to disarm. They build rapport to bypass scrutiny. Watch what happens after the charm fades. Does the person remain consistent? Do they keep their word? Do they follow through on what they praised? The Stoic does not confuse likability with trustworthiness. They measure the person by structure. If the charm is used to avoid correction or to maintain influence without responsibility, it is a tactic. Trust is built on reliability, not appearance. Charm may open a door, but what follows must support the relationship. The Stoic observes who stays steady when charm is no longer effective. They watch for shifts in tone when the mood changes. If charm disappears when truth appears, that gap must be taken seriously. A Stoic remains respectful but does not grant authority based on personality. They look for behavior that confirms principle. They test charm by watching what it protects and what it avoids. If the person becomes defensive when their image is questioned, it reveals their intent. Charm without discipline is unreliable. Chapter 12. Shifting blame as a habit. Blame is one of the clearest markers of avoidance. A person who never accepts fault, who always finds someone else to carry responsibility, reveals their relationship to truth. They do not treat mistakes as lessons, they treat them as threats. The result is constant redirection. When someone lies, they often use blame to distract from it. They focus attention on your tone, your timing, or your response. They turn the discussion away from their conduct and toward your reaction. This tactic removes pressure from them and places it on you. The lie is no longer the problem. Your discomfort becomes the issue. Stoics recognize this pattern quickly. Shifting blame is not a one-time response. It becomes a habit when left unchecked. It damages trust. It builds resentment. It trains both people to avoid truth. One avoids responsibility, the other avoids conflict. The Stoic remains clear. They identify when blame is being used as a shield. They name the pattern internally. They observe when the person diverts attention away from action and into reaction. They stop engaging in the deflection. They bring the focus back to what occurred, not how it feels to confront it. This does not require aggression. It requires clarity. The Stoic does not allow blame to distort facts. If a person continues to assign fault to everything but their own behavior, the Stoic adjusts. They do not continue arguing. They stop accepting the shift. They reduce emotional engagement with someone who refuses to examine their role. Blame disrupts communication. It blocks learning. It creates emotional imbalance. A Stoic does not accept that dynamic as normal. They return to stable ground. They hold responsibility with strength. If the other person cannot do the same, the Stoic recalibrates the relationship. Chapter 13. Half-truths and selective honesty. A half-truth is a refined form of lying. It allows a person to appear honest while withholding key details. Selective honesty is used to protect image, avoid consequences, or redirect attention. It creates the illusion of transparency without the reality of full disclosure. The Stoic pays close attention to what is said and what is left out. When a person offers part of the story and stops where accountability begins, that boundary is not accidental. It is maintained deliberately. They reveal just enough to seem sincere, but retain enough to control perception. This tactic is difficult to detect without strong awareness. The person sounds honest. They may even admit fault. But they curate the facts. They leave out context. They distort by omission. This builds a version of events that is easier to defend, harder to challenge, and carefully managed. The Stoic watches for consistency. If a person repeatedly avoids specific details, changes timelines, or answers selectively when pressure rises, those omissions reveal intent. The Stoic notes these gaps. They do not rush to confront. They observe the pattern. When selective honesty becomes consistent, trust is reduced. A lie told directly is easier to identify. A lie told by omission requires more discipline to track. The Stoic builds that discipline by returning to facts. They write things down. They compare present stories to past statements. They observe what changes and what remains hidden. This keeps their judgment grounded. Selective honesty is often used to maintain relationships while avoiding correction. It allows the person to preserve access without confronting their full impact. The Stoic does not accept partial truth as a foundation. They adjust their expectations. They begin to view the person through their behavior, not their words. When truth is incomplete, the Stoic simplifies their interaction. They stop asking for clarity from someone who does not offer it. They reduce emotional investment. They engage only at the level of consistency. This protects the Stoic's energy and preserves their standard. Chapter 14. The Disruption of Consistency. Consistency reveals intent. A person who lives in alignment with their values, who keeps their word and follows through on commitments, creates stability. When that consistency breaks, something deeper is often revealed. The Stoic pays close attention to these shifts. In relationships, inconsistency is a signal. It is not always malicious, but it always carries information. When a person changes tone, behavior, or position without explanation, the Stoic observes the change before reacting to it. They measure how often these shifts occur, when they appear, and what they coincide with. A pattern of inconsistency, especially when combined with defensiveness, avoidance, or selective memory, suggests manipulation or internal conflict. Someone who says one thing and does another may not be grounded in truth. They may be managing perception instead of living from principle. The Stoic does not assume. They record. They keep their observations clean and separate from emotion. They compare current behavior to prior statements. They note contradictions and delays. They look for cycles, especially those that emerge when accountability increases. When inconsistency becomes a repeated pattern, trust must be reduced. Clarity must increase. The Stoic becomes more direct, more structured, and more reserved. They do not chase explanations. They do not engage in emotional reasoning. They place responsibility where it belongs, on the person breaking alignment. The Stoic holds consistency as a standard, not a request. If someone cannot meet it, then the relationship must be redefined. Access must be earned, not given to those who shift without warning or clarity. Chapter 15. The Use of Emotion to Escape Accountability. Emotion can be used as a tool. Some use it to create connection. Others use it to avoid responsibility. When someone expresses intense emotion during moments of confrontation, it may not be a sign of remorse. It may be a method of escape. Tears, frustration, and exaggerated displays of guilt often redirect the conversation. Instead of focusing on what happened, the attention shifts to how the person feels. This makes the other person pause, comfort, or back away from the issue. The original topic becomes secondary. The emotional reaction becomes the focus. The Stoic does not deny emotion. They recognize its presence without letting it alter their structure. They observe when emotion appears, why it appears, and what it interrupts. If the emotion consistently shows up during conversations that require clarity, they begin to study the pattern. A person who uses emotion to interrupt accountability is not always aware of it, but the effect remains the same. It stops forward movement. It prevents correction. It protects the individual from consequence. Over time, this pattern teaches those around them to avoid confrontation entirely. The Stoic holds steady. They do not raise their voice. They do not soften the standard. They acknowledge the emotion but return to the topic. They give space without abandoning structure. They refuse to reward avoidance with peace. When someone uses emotion as a defense against truth, the Stoic adjusts their expectations. They stop seeking mature resolution from someone who consistently escapes it. They reduce their reliance on emotional expression as a marker of sincerity. They act based on behavior, not reaction. Emotional reactions that prevent resolution do not build trust. They stall it. The Stoic remains kind, but they remain clear. They protect the integrity of the conversation. They continue to ask the necessary questions. They keep the attention on what must be addressed. This is how they move forward while others attempt to retreat. Chapter 16. When apologies become a script. Some people use apologies as a strategy. They repeat the words that sound sincere, but nothing changes. These apologies are structured to calm the situation, not to correct behavior. The pattern is predictable: mistake, reaction, apology, reset, then repetition. The Stoic studies patterns. They look at what follows the apology. They ask whether the behavior improves or stays the same. If the words are always followed by familiar failures, the apology is no longer meaningful. It becomes part of a cycle. It exists to avoid consequence. A person who uses apology to maintain control often speaks in familiar phrases. They say what they think is expected. They express regret without making changes. They may appear emotional. They may promise improvement, but they do not remove the behavior they admitted was harmful. The Stoic sees through this repetition. A real apology creates change. It leads to different actions, clearer boundaries, and renewed respect. When these things are missing, the apology loses all value. The Stoic does not depend on how sorry someone sounds. They watch what that person does next. The Stoic does not punish. They adjust. They stop rewarding the apology if the outcome stays the same. They do not argue over sincerity. They reduce emotional investment. They become more selective with trust. If words and actions do not align, the Stoic lets go of the words. This protects their peace. It removes false hope. It ends the cycle. An apology that repeats without change is not regret. It is maintenance. It exists to keep access, not to restore trust. The Stoic identifies this early. They act accordingly. Chapter 17. Strategic confusion and manufactured uncertainty. A person who wants to avoid accountability may use confusion as a tactic. They speak in vague terms. They answer questions with more questions. They overload conversations with details that do not clarify but distract. This manufactured uncertainty keeps others off balance. The Stoic notices when clarity is being avoided on purpose. Confusion is not always a result of poor communication. It is sometimes designed to interrupt the process of understanding. When someone speaks in circles, changes their version of events frequently, or avoids giving direct answers, the Stoic does not chase clarity. They hold their questions and wait for structure. Strategic confusion delays resolution. It makes accountability difficult to trace. It leads to frustration, which benefits the person using it. The longer the conversation goes without clear terms, the easier it is for them to shift blame, deny facts, or reframe the issue. The Stoic resists the pull to untangle their story. They listen carefully, but do not absorb the disarray. The Stoic reduces the conversation to essentials: what was said, what was done, what was promised, what was repeated. They write it down if needed. They remove emotional language. They extract patterns. Then they measure what the person does next. If confusion continues to appear at critical moments, the Stoic sees it as a form of evasion. They lower the weight of the person's words. They adjust how much they invest in the relationship. They stop seeking clear answers from someone who benefits from keeping things unclear. Disorder is useful to people who want to avoid structure. The Stoic recognizes this and removes themselves from that system. They return to logic. They remain patient, and when patterns form through the fog, they act decisively based on what they have verified. Chapter 18. Conditional integrity and selective ethics. Some people behave well when it benefits them. They appear honest when honesty is easy. They appear loyal when loyalty brings reward. Their integrity is not anchored. It shifts based on what they can gain or avoid. The Stoic does not evaluate a person by isolated acts of virtue. They look at how that virtue holds under stress. Conditional integrity reveals itself in subtle ways. A person may be generous in public, but selfish in private. They may speak of values, but abandon them when challenged. They may support fairness until fairness limits their advantage. These contradictions create instability in relationships. The Stoic pays attention to when values vanish. Ethics are tested when pressure increases. If someone becomes reactive, evasive, or controlling when outcomes do not favor them, it shows the true structure of their principles. Selective ethics are dangerous because they imitate character while avoiding commitment. The person sounds aligned with virtue, but only follows it when it's convenient. The Stoic listens carefully when a person explains their exceptions. Do they justify betrayals? Do they redefine right and wrong based on their position? Do they treat others differently when no one is watching? These shifts in behavior are markers. They point to flexibility where firmness is required. True integrity is measured by consistency, not convenience. The Stoic tracks how a person behaves in private, how they treat those with no status, and how they respond when things do not go their way. These moments reveal more than declarations or intentions. When someone's values disappear when tested, the Stoic makes adjustments. They stop expecting consistency from a person who uses principle only when it suits them. They reduce the weight of that person's influence. They shift trust toward those who remain stable regardless of gain or loss. The Stoic does not condemn, they clarify. They watch the difference between stated ethics and practiced ethics. That gap defines the level of trust. When integrity is real, it survives difficulty. When it is conditional, it collapses. The Stoic places trust in what holds. Chapter 19. When promises are used as tools. Promises carry weight in Stoic thought. They represent commitment. They reflect alignment between word and will. But not all promises are given with intention. Some are used as tools, meant to manage emotion, delay consequences, or hold control. A person may offer a promise during conflict. They speak of future behavior to avoid present accountability. They give you something to anticipate so they can avoid correction now. The Stoic identifies this pattern by studying follow-through. Does the promise turn into action, or does it stay a placeholder? A promise with no plan is noise. It is not a strategy for change. It is a way to hold position. The Stoic watches whether the person who promises also prepares. Do they adjust their habits? Do they take steps that support their statement? Or do they expect forgiveness in exchange for intent? The danger of hollow promises is that they create delay. They extend cycles of trust without requiring growth. They keep relationships suspended between past harm and future repair. The Stoic does not remain in that state. They draw the line between commitment and convenience. When a person repeats promises with no progress, the Stoic responds by reducing expectation. They no longer take verbal commitments as evidence. They begin using behavior as the only proof of change. This protects the relationship from remaining in emotional debt. Promises are meaningful only when supported by consistent steps. The Stoic accepts nothing less. They listen carefully, but they observe more carefully. They hold the promise to its outcome. If it does not arrive, the value of the words is removed. This discipline prevents manipulation. It clarifies intention. It protects time, trust, and energy. The Stoic remains open to those who build change through effort. They remain closed to those who maintain access through empty declarations. Chapter 20. The Final Lie. The Disguised Appeal to Empathy. The most difficult lie to detect is the one that uses your strength against you. When someone appeals to your empathy, your compassion, and your moral character to avoid accountability, they are not just lying. They are manipulating the best parts of you to protect the worst parts of themselves. They might say, "You of all people should understand," or "I thought you were the kind of person who would forgive." These are not reflections of truth. They are pressure points. The words are crafted to make you question your judgment. They are intended to move you away from reason and closer to emotional concession. These statements are not offered in pursuit of truth. They are tools of influence. They function as soft commands that ask you to trade your standards for comfort. When someone uses your character against you, they are not being vulnerable. They are trying to shift responsibility. They are turning your empathy into a liability. They count on your reluctance to seem harsh. They rely on your values to work in their favor while they avoid living by those same values themselves. This is not an accident. It is a pattern often used by those who understand your moral structure and seek to exploit it. The Stoic does not surrender judgment to flattery, guilt, or emotional framing. They return to observable facts. What was said? What was done? What changed? What stayed the same? When someone tries to create doubt through emotional leverage, the Stoic brings the discussion back to structure. They ask grounded questions. They measure what actually happened against what was promised. They do not make decisions based on emotional framing. They make decisions based on verified behavior. A person who presents sorrow but never changes action is not showing remorse. They are avoiding consequence. If they display emotion only when boundaries are enforced, it is not a sign of transformation. It is a sign of resistance. When emotion is used to end discussion, pause judgment, or gain sympathy, the Stoic steps back. They take time to assess whether the behavior aligns with the reaction. When regret is used to silence your standards, it must be met with calm resistance. When sadness is used to pause consequence, it must be measured against their pattern. If the sorrow does not produce correction, it loses its meaning. The Stoic watches closely for this pattern. They listen without interruption, but they do not let emotion overwrite responsibility. The Stoic does not close their heart. They remain capable of compassion, but they also remain capable of discipline. They recognize when kindness is being used as a barrier to clarity. They protect the space between forgiveness and foolishness. They maintain the standard even when others try to soften it. They are not led by discomfort. They are led by principle. You are not cruel for requiring consistency. You are not cold for expecting others to uphold the same clarity they ask of you. A standard without enforcement is not a standard. Boundaries that are easily bypassed by emotional appeals are not real boundaries. The Stoic honors their values by holding them steady in the face of pressure. The final lie is the most subtle. It is not shouted. It is not obvious. It often arrives dressed in vulnerability and quiet distress. It is the lie that asks you to lower your principles so someone else can feel safe in their comfort. It asks you to carry the discomfort of accountability so they can escape it. It does not come with malice. It comes with strategic helplessness. You are asked to protect the relationship by abandoning your clarity. You are told that holding a standard makes you hard or unkind. This lie works when you believe that peace is always worth more than structure. The Stoic does not accept that exchange. They do not collapse their standard for temporary calm. They do not dilute their principles to preserve appearance. They recognize that peace without truth is not peace. It is pretense. They understand that harmony built on one-sided tolerance is not sustainable. It leads to quiet resentment, hidden conflict, and internal confusion. The Stoic does not make space for illusions. They do not adjust facts to preserve image. They do not allow emotional appeals to alter what is real. They measure the full cost of every compromise. If a person avoids responsibility and demands connection at the same time, the Stoic sees the contradiction. They identify when the relationship is being used to avoid personal growth. If betrayal is absorbed without consequence, it becomes routine. If your standards are suspended to keep someone close, the entire connection shifts. The structure breaks. The terms become vague. The behavior worsens. The Stoic does not allow this shift. They stay clear. They keep their line visible. They do not hand their judgment to anyone, no matter how soft the request sounds. Clarity, once weakened, is difficult to recover. Trust, once stretched, is no longer whole. The Stoic understands this and takes steps to protect the foundation before it fractures. They do not wait until resentment builds. They do not wait until their silence becomes agreement. They act early. They act firmly. They hold the line before it disappears. This is how the Stoic maintains internal order. This is how they protect their consistency in environments that reward avoidance. This is how they end cycles that depend on emotional control. They do not raise their voice. They do not retaliate. They simply withdraw their consent. They stop supporting what has already proven false. Empathy is not given to patterns that destroy clarity. Forgiveness is not handed out to delay responsibility. Kindness is not applied where truth is rejected. The Stoic makes this distinction. They reserve their energy for people who value correction. They remain open to connection, but only on stable ground. They do not chase reconciliation where there is no effort. They do not continue conversations where reality is denied. In the end, the Stoic ends the cycle through stillness, truth, and restraint. They do not warn. They do not plead. They walk with their principles intact. They protect their mind, their values, and their path by never allowing lies, however disguised, to take the place of integrity.